Jimmie Rogers has been the head coach at Iowa State for 39 days, and the program looks entirely different. Some people aren't a fan, but I'm about to break down all of the changes Jimmie Rogers has made that are about to send the Cyclones into their best season yet.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, now the #1 sports podcast network, thanks to you. I am your host, Nick Marovets. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Be sure to hit subscribe down below so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. As today, we're starting off with football, looking back at the last 39 days of Jimmie Rogers' tenure as Iowa State's head coach and kind of looking at the highlights because so many changes have happened. I have a few that I think are very specifically going to send Iowa State into the up and to the right category, absolutely going to murder it.
You are Locked On Cyclones, your daily podcast on the Iowa State Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Cyclones, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, now the #1 sports podcast network, thanks to you. I am your host, Nick Marovets. Thank you for making this your first watch or listen of the day. I appreciate it more than you know. Be sure to hit subscribe down below so we can prove once and for all that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. As today, we're starting off with Jimmie Rogers, specifically, obviously the football program as a whole, but Rogers has been the head coach for 39 days, and a ton of changes have come about. Which ones are my favorite? Which ones are going to send the Cyclones into their best season yet? I am about to highlight every single one of those. Then we're going to pivot into basketball for the rest of the episode because we have a huge game tonight. First, Joe Lunardi just disrespecting the Cyclones. We'll break that down and what that means for the team. Then we're going to preview the Kansas game. Just how important is this game? How much do the Cyclones need to win it? Stick around to find out. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. All right, let's dive into the football side of things first. I'm super excited about this football team. I tell you what, man, when Matt Campbell announced that he was going to be leaving on December 5th, 2025, there was certainly a dark cloud over my apartment. I mean, I will say it's winter, so that kind of happens a lot with the dark cloud thing, but this one felt especially dark, and I didn't know what the future was going to look like. And then when Jimmie Rogers was announced to be the next head coach, I actually had a lot of people texting me, hey, this guy's going to be the real deal. This guy could take the Cyclones to new heights. And so I jumped on board right away, kind of blindly. I was like, you know what? We don't really have a choice. We kind of have to back this guy immediately, move on, next chapter type of thing. And all Jimmie Rogers has done so far in the last 39 days has met my expectations, if not exceeded them. A lot of the moves that Jimmie Rogers has made, whether it be staff hires or handling the transfer portal, I've loved him. I really have. And so if there's things you don't love about Jimmie Rogers, I'd love to know what they are in the comments down below. We're extremely early into this thing. Obviously, Jimmie Rogers has not used a timeout at the wrong time yet. Jimmie Rogers has not gotten a personal foul for being crazy on the sidelines that cost Iowa State a game. He's just been a coach basically in his office. So there's not really a whole lot of opportunity for him to mess up so far, which is part of the reason that I am so high on him. But also, I mean, there are going to be people out there that just have opinions on Jimmie Rogers, and I actually do want to hear those. I'm very curious. But let's dive into a few of the things that Jimmie Rogers has done, and I think that are very, very good for Iowa State. The first thing that I want to bring up here, because we haven't really talked about this, Iowa State will have a special teams coordinator next season, okay? Rob Grand will be the special teams coordinator under Jimmie Rogers. We don't need to spend a ton of time on this, but there is something to be said about Iowa State not just fumbling punts or having guys blocked into live balls. Honestly, our kicking game has been pretty solid. The punting game is where I'm always holding my breath, and I'm very excited for that not to be the case anymore. Grand has spent the last 7 years at Iowa State, so he's familiar with the system, but now he is just a dedicated special teams coordinator, and hopefully that will lead to, I can actually breathe during punts, or maybe, who knows, even go to the fridge and get a snack or something during a punt. I know that that's a true special teams play. And of course, you should always watch every single play, including kickoff and kick returns. But man, it would be nice to be able to like not have to panic every single time Iowa State is punting or punt returning. So that was a huge move because we didn't really see that under Matt Campbell. I believe maybe there was like 1 year in there, if I'm mistaken, it's on me, where we had a special teams coordinator. But now it looks like this is going to be a priority under Jimmie Rogers. Another name, another staff hire I wanted to bring up, Tyler Roll being the offensive coordinator, I think is great for this team, but also the fit of how Jimmie Rogers is going to run this ship, right? Like I think the way that we're going to, it sounds like, run the ball, dominate the trenches. Tyler Roll is the exact right guy for that. And it can be troubling if the head coach wants to win the game in the trenches with the running game, kind of like trying to think of like maybe like Big Ten style or like AFC North kind of style, like that really hard-nosed Detroit Lions, Packers, Bears kind of feeling offense, but you have an offensive coordinator who is much more like West Coast style, or like what the Big 12 was, like think like Patrick Mahomes versus Baker Mayfield type of offense. I think we had, what Mahomes had like 80 throws in that game. Like when there's a miscommunication there between the head coach and the offensive coordinator, especially in a situation where the head coach isn't, I mean, I think we can all agree we're leaning defensive minded for Jimmie Rogers here. That kind of tension isn't ideal for a football team. And so I am very excited about that. I think this was a perfect hire at offensive coordinator. And there have been a lot of questions over the last few years about Taylor Mauser. And I think, obviously that era ended and it is what it is. We don't even have to worry about that anymore. But when you're comparing the two, I think this is going to be a really, really good fit for Iowa State. And I like the direction that the offense and the program are headed. Speaking of coordinators, I'm just going to go ahead and say that Jesse Bobbitt, I think, was a wonderful hire as well on the defensive side of the ball. And I am a big fan of that. But the bigger one that I'm excited about was Ross Watson out of Toledo. I think this was a wonderful find. And the secondary has been an area where I think Iowa State has, or I feel, I feel like Iowa State has really been a place where they can hang their hat. Obviously, the linebackers this year were phenomenal, but 2 years ago when they went to the Big 12 championship game, one of the best secondaries in college football. This year, honestly, significantly better than with the amount of injuries they had than I expected them to be. So this is an area where Iowa State can continue to be really, really solid on defense. And then if Jimmie Rogers focuses on the defensive line, I mean, you're just kind of going with a 1-2 punch here, right? Square up, boom, boom, pow. All of a sudden, Iowa State's basically looking like the Texans, which is crazy, the correlation between Houston with obviously the 3 wide receivers and the defense that Iowa State could be next season. Not to go off on a super tangent here, but the Texans had the worst offense of all time against the Steelers and still won the game like 30-6 or whatever it was. And so that defense was so dominant. If Iowa State's defense is anything like that, I mean, Big 12 title incoming, national title incoming, I think that Jesse Bobbitt and Ross Watson are definitely big pieces of that and are going to send Iowa State at least off in the right direction. And then as we move away from the coordinators here, I've got a few kind of mindsets and portal targets, if you will, that I've been really pleased with. And just to piggyback off of what I've been saying, the concept that Jimmie Rogers wants to win in the trenches and be solid on defense, I think is a recipe for success. It's a known story, like it's a story tradition, if you will, I guess is maybe the way to put it. You're not trying anything too crazy here. You're not trying to reinvent the wheel. You're going through a known path of success. Right? Like obviously, like when Air Raid kind of came out, that was new. Nobody really knew if that would work. It's not really what Jimmie Rogers is doing here. He's like, we're going to win with the big boys up front. We're going to dominate the line, and we're going to be really tough on defense. I feel like that is a recipe for success. And why try this new crazy recipe when you know that chicken noodle soup is one of the best in your bag, right? Like just go back to that, especially if you really want to further the analogy. If you're sick, you're not trying some crazy, flavorful, spicy recipe. Like you never know what's going to happen. We don't want to play those games in this situation for Iowa State. Not to say that the program is sick, but you're in a period of transition. You don't want to try anything too crazy, too new. Who knows what's going to happen? Right now, this would be a great time to go to a staple, chicken noodle soup. This is kind of the chicken noodle soup. Win in the trenches, have great defense. Defense wins championships. Defense travels. an offensive line, like you can just always be tougher, always give more effort kind of offensive line mindset. I like where the mentality is at for Jimmie Rogers. We're going to go towards a few of the actual transfer portal targets and kind of methodologies that Jimmie Rogers has employed and used in his first 39 days here in a second, and then we'll get into basketball. So don't go anywhere. We're coming right back after this. But first, a word from our friends over at Wayfair. The new year is here, and it's the perfect time to reset your routine and refresh your space. If you're spending more time at home, you might as well love how it looks and feels. That's why you should turn to Wayfair. It's a one-stop shop for getting your home back on track. From bedding and mattresses to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair makes it easy to start the year fresh. Wayfair has everything you need for a full home refresh, all in one place. Whether you're updating your living room, organizing your space, or upgrading your work from home setup, Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find exactly what works for your style and your budget. And honestly, kind of an underrated thing here made getting back into a routine this year feel a lot more manageable. When it's a full refresh, that's just how my brain works. Okay. And Wayfair made that super easy. I found some pieces that match my style without spending a fortune. Shout out. So get organized, refreshed, and back on track this new year for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Few final points on Jimmie Rogers and how he is running his first 39 days as the Iowa State head coach. And then we'll pivot into basketball. It's going to be a loaded segment, so don't go anywhere. But first, I just want to thank you for making Locked On Cyclones your first listen of the day. Thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network out there. We couldn't do it without you guys. You guys are the GOATs. Just want to remind you guys of the Everydayer Club. If you're not familiar yet, we have a link in the show notes or on the YouTube description if you're watching, where you can learn more. If you have a pen and paper, it's lockedoncyclones.supercast.com. Just a great opportunity to get some ad-free audio for Locked On Cyclones wherever you listen, or access to a members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server. Or I suppose I shouldn't say or, it's an and. But I just want to let you guys know, remind you, shout out to every single one of you guys for making this your first watch or listen every single day. Couldn't do it without you. Let's dive into the last few pieces here of Jimmie Rogers and my thoughts on what he has done so far as a head coach. The focus on the offensive line. Gosh, I love it. I love it. And I wrote that down as a separate point because I know that the philosophy is the lines, the trenches, the defense. I just talked about that like a few minutes ago. But he has actually walked the walk in the portal, and I am a huge fan of it. I mean, obviously, the amount of linemen is undeniable. And that's just really what it comes down to for me. There are, I think, 9, 10, or 11 offensive linemen. I don't have the list in front of me in the transfer portal committed to Iowa State. That right there is walking the walk. Now, I've seen the jokes. Is Iowa State going to hand the ball off to an offensive lineman next year? Maybe. It's going to be tough to stop a guy of that magnitude. I don't know if that's exactly the route Jimmie Rogers is going, but I know for a fact there will be depth at the very least on the offensive line. And we know that offensive lines kind of tend to operate as a unit significantly better than when you put 5 of the best guys out there. So, you know, I'm not saying that this is the reason Jimmie Rogers is doing this, but when you have a ton of offensive linemen, you can kind of mix and match, puzzle together and find out what the best lineup is and move forward from there. So I really like that we're seeing it in the transfer portal. Jimmie Rogers, you know, that first initial press conference, some people I feel like don't put a ton of weight in that because it's like, well, of course he's going to say all these things. I just need to see it actually done. This was him actually doing it. And without getting into actual specific players, because I don't think that that's fair, not only to Jimmie Rogers, but to the players, I like that we have a quarterback battle here in Ames. I don't think, you know, this is the same as having 2 quarterbacks. You know, the saying goes, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. I think if you have a quarterback battle, I mean, what is this, January? Or we're not playing football for 8 months or whatever it is. This is a time to have a quarterback battle. And what does that mean? Both quarterbacks getting better constantly. I don't know if it's going to be Jalen Rayner or Zane Flores. I would obviously lean towards Jalen Rayner, less eligibility than Zane Flores, could have a higher potential, but a much younger player. This feels like it's probably Jalen Rayner's job, but he is going to be pushed by Zane Flores, and that quarterback battle is going to make Jalen Rayner better. Or potentially you have a quarterback who is better than what we assume to be number one option. So I feel like it's a win-win situation. The fact that Jimmie Rogers was able to kind of piece this whole thing together feels like a major win. And like I said, not trying to get into specific players because I just don't feel like that's, fair on Jimmie Rogers. The transfer portal is a crazy place, but also not fair on the players to put that much pressure on them. I mean, it's January 13th. I'll put pressure on players as we get into the season, and expectations are set. But for now, I mean, I just like the concept of the quarterback battle. One player that I do want to specifically mention, I'm not putting pressure on him, I'm acknowledging his past achievements. Keeping Kyle Conradi was electric. I also I did put on here Dom Overby was another name that I was very excited about, but Kyle Conradi was a name that I really, there was like 6 names that I was like, can we just please keep these guys? And of course, most of them left. It was a tough period of time, but Kyle Conradi sticking around. I don't know how much Jimmie Rogers had to do with that. Obviously, Kyle Conradi, an Iowa kid, but gosh, does that feel good? Does that feel good? That's a major weapon for Iowa State. A lot of people want to talk about like the weapon at quarterback, weapon at wide receiver, weapon on the defensive side of the ball. When you have a Kyle Conradi on your team, you have like a hidden rocket launcher in your back pocket. And that's actually a pretty solid analogy because he made it from 60 plus. There's just not very many kickers who can do that consistently, let alone in an actual game. So shout out to Kyle Conradi, shout out to Jimmie Rogers. Overall grade, I'd say probably at least an A. Definitely teetering on that A+ margin there. What would you grade Jimmie Rogers so far this offseason as his 39 days as head coach? I've been very, very impressed. All right, let's pivot over to basketball. I guess you could say pun intended. Joe Lunardi, okay, basketball analyst for ESPN. Looks like he's the inventor of bracketology. Look, he's got some comments about Iowa State that I think are actually, they're not good, but they are in a way positive. Let me explain. Iowa State, per his latest bracketology, is, by my count, the last 1 seed in, okay? Arizona, UConn, Michigan, and Iowa State are the top 1 seeds in this breakdown, Iowa State getting the South region. And it notes here that Duke will be knocking on the door of a 1 seed if Iowa State goes down. Duke currently in the East region. It looks like, I think this is behind Gonzaga, if I am interpreting this correctly. The biggest reason that this is like quote unquote disrespect is because Michigan is still a 1 seed after losing to, Wisconsin. And honestly, Penn State, watching that final possession for Penn State had me concerned. Like, why was Michigan even in that position? Right. It wasn't I didn't watch the entire game. I will be completely honest, but the last possession for Penn State was dribble the ball around for 15 seconds and throw the ball towards the rim and hope it goes in. How do you even get within 2 of Michigan playing that style of basketball? Genuinely, what happened in the prior, 45 minutes or like what happened before that for them to be even in that position? So Michigan plus the loss to Wisconsin is still a 1 seed. And if Iowa State goes on the road to Kansas, to Allen Fieldhouse, and loses, they drop down from a 1 seed. Now, I understand this is early mid-January. We still have a lot of basketball left to play for, but what does that set for precedent? Like, is this saying that Iowa State has to, and I know this isn't end-all be-all, but is this Iowa State has to win out? They have to go undefeated? I've been very much on the record saying, like, they're not going to do that. That's not basketball. That's not how this is going to go. I'm sure Arizona will lose before they play Iowa State. Iowa State will probably lose before they play Arizona. That's not a lack of confidence. Like, that's literally just what basketball is. It's a tough sport. It's ups and downs. Michigan, I'm not even holding really anything against Michigan here because I can't expect them to win games by 45 points all season long. Like, it's just not how basketball works. I am not saying that Michigan is undeserving of a 1 seed. I am arguing the fact that Iowa State's just going to, like, because Iowa State's not, trying to think of like major, like Duke, right? Like Duke, obviously a much bigger brand, actually perfect. They're the team that's going to potentially be a 1 seed. Because Iowa State's not a Duke, they don't get any benefit of the doubt. That's what I don't love. And the reason I'm bringing this whole thing up is it's really easy for Iowa State, I feel like, at 16-0, the best program or best starting program history, to become complacent. And I've talked about this a little bit. It even feels like in games sometimes Iowa State gets a little bit complacent and then something happens and they turn it back on. This to me feels like something that can be considered bulletin board material, something that TJ Otzelberger can kind of be like, hey, you guys, you see what's on the line here. Like, it's going to be easy to let your foot off the gas. We cannot do that. We can't touch the brake at all. And we got to just floor the gas, right? We got to really put the pedal to the metal here and win as many games as we can all season long. If they go undefeated into the tournament, I'll be slightly terrified actually, because it's like that would be the craziest run of all time. But you're going to have to get pretty close to that. And I think that argument will potentially, if TJ Otzelberger were to choose to go that route, that would potentially be something that I think could propel Iowa State through a few of these tough games before their final stretch of the season. 7 or 8 games, I can't remember. I think it's 7 that are really, really tough. The second time they play Kansas, obviously they'll play Kansas tonight. We're going to talk about that in a second. But the second time they play Kansas starts the mark of that that final run for the season between like BYU, Arizona, Kansas yet again, Houston is in there. It's going to be a tough run. And so I just wanted to bring this up, not because, I have beef with Joe Lunardi or I have a problem with Michigan, but because I think this could be used by TJ Otzelberger for a team that is, just an astounding start, ridiculous start. And that can always lead to, not always, but it certainly can lead to complacency. And that's the biggest thing you're trying to avoid if you are TJ Otzelberger. The enemy is not poor play. The enemy is average play. That is absolutely enemy number one if you are TJ Otzelberger or the Iowa State Cyclones right now. And I feel like this right here, just maybe print it out. Big old red circle on that paper there. Put that on the bulletin board. Keep the guys in check. Remind them, hey, real quick, just don't forget about this. Speaking of keeping them in check, they're going to need to get the win over Kansas tonight. But how badly does Iowa State need to win this game? We'll break that down coming up right here after this. But first, a word from our friends over at Game Time. There is nothing like college football season. Just truly nothing. Tailgates, packed stadiums, and being right there in the middle of it all. The energy, the bands are electric. The moments you remember forever, but actually getting those tickets, that part used to be pretty frustrating, not gonna lie. Long queues, logins, prices jumping at checkout. That is why Game Time gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I loved, personally, you guys know this by now, it's by far my favorite feature, being able to see the view from my seat before I buy it. I don't do so good with the maps, all right? I'm not really good with the spatial awareness thing. Just let me see the view. Game Time does that for me, so I know exactly what I'm getting. And the zone deals are a super cool feature as well. You pick the section, Game Time picks out the seats, and you save even more. The fact that I know prices include all fees, up front makes the whole process super stress-free. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Iowa State's playing Kansas. This is one that a lot of people have circled as a major game. They had it circled before the season. They have it circled now. They're turning their TV dials to the Cyclones versus the Jayhawks tonight. And of course, I am going to be in that group of people watching this one. But how hard am I going to be rooting for the Cyclones? Am I going to be yelling so loud that my next door neighbors are putting in noise complaints? Or am I going to be Joe Cool, putting both arms on the rests, kicking my feet up? Whatever happens, happens. To be completely honest, this is a must-win game for Iowa State, but not for the reasons you would expect. I don't know if I'll be getting a noise complaint. I certainly hope not, but I am going to be cheering quite loudly. I'm probably going to be getting quite upset if we have some ref issues because Iowa State needs to win this game. This is a game that a team like Iowa State and what they are projected to be should win. That's point number one. Like it just becomes something where if you are the number one seed that you're supposed to be, if you are the, Big 12 favorite, not that everybody had you favored as that going into the season, but now like a team that is a legitimate, like it's Arizona and Iowa State, kind of how people are talking about the Big 12. This is a game you win. And I know it's a tough game. I understand that. You're going on the road. I will say really quickly, though, Kansas does not look very good. I will be completely candid with you there. And that's not even from an Iowa State fan, I hate Kansas. No, that's literally just me being like, what are they doing? What are they cooking up over there? Is that a recipe for success? It feels like maybe not ideal, but also that does scare me as an Iowa State fan too, that the Iowa State's players would be going and thinking that, because you have to be ready for the toughest game so far this season. This is a game that you have to win. You're at Allen Fieldhouse. You cannot do basically what TCU did. I have very few games in my mind contain a collapse the way TCU collapsed at Allen Fieldhouse, and that's the magic of Allen Fieldhouse, man. I completely understand that. I know that to be true. But you can't do that if you are this number 2 team in the country that you're supposed to be. You can't do that if you are going to go and be a 1 seed in the tournament or a national title contender or a Final Four favorite. That's not what those teams do. Those teams go into, tough environments and they get the win. They find a way. Does Milan have to go, 8 of 10 from 3? No. Would it help? Of course it would. And that's what makes Iowa State so great is it has the opportunity to do that. Or they have the opportunity to do that. But even if Milan shoots, 1 of 6 to start the game, I do want to see him shoot a lot of times, regardless if he's making or missing. Who's going to step up? Is it going to be Taman that has a 20-point game, or does Joshua Jefferson light the floor up and go for 27 and 18 rebounds? Right, like that. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but the team needs to be ready to adjust and to accommodate for whether it's someone not playing up to the level that we are kind of accustomed to, or if it's somebody on Kansas that's just lighting the floor up and can't miss, who's going to answer that call? Because you can't just let the phone ring and go to voicemail. That's just not how this works. Another reason I think Iowa State needs to win this game is you're going to be at Cincinnati later this week as well. So another road game, more momentum based. This isn't really the end of the world. You can very easily isolate game by game. And I think TJ Otzelberger has done a phenomenal job of instilling that mentality into this team. The win over Oklahoma State, the win over Baylor, the win over West Virginia, even the win over Iowa or Purdue, those are all in the past. They don't really matter. Kind of the same thing as Tom Brady with what's your favorite Super Bowl? The next one. I don't remember what happened last week because it doesn't have any impact on today other than there's obviously reasons that past games would impact current situations. But my point being, those wins don't help you win against Kansas. And I understand that a loss against Kansas wouldn't technically help or hurt you against Cincinnati because they can all kind of be treated as if they're in a vacuum. But from the mental side of things, it doesn't hurt to get a win against Kansas. It doesn't hurt to keep the momentum going and the magical start to the season off and keeping going here. When I'm looking at the whole season as a whole, I mentioned this earlier: Kansas, Cincinnati, UCF, Oklahoma State, Colorado, Kansas State, Baylor, TCU. These next 2, 4, 6, 8 games is my count, are kind of that lull of the season in comparison. Very clear. I want to be very clear about that in comparison to the crazy stretch that Iowa State has to end the year. And this is one of those where I don't feel like you can afford to drop anything, honestly, and go on a crazy streak of losses. That is not going to be good for morale. And it just feels like you find yourself in a situation where Iowa State was at this year in the football side of things with 4 straight losses, and it just everything blew up. Everything completely fell apart. Can't have that. And a loss to Kansas would start that. Doesn't necessarily mean that it would cause that, but it certainly could start that. And I don't think that would be I also part of it too, is I just don't want to lose. Can we just not lose? I feel is that too much to ask? So I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it for Iowa State to win this game? Probably a solid 7. It's important, absolutely, but it's not make or break the season. If this loss hurts them in the seeding or whatever, it is what it is. It's bulletin board material. I talked about that in the second segment. And thank you for not only watching or listening to that, but all the way till this point. You're a real one for that. But man, I just feel like this is one you have to get if you're Iowa State. This is one you're supposed to win. Kansas has not been looking that good recently. Of course, they're going to turn it on. They're going to turn it all the way up to max for this game tonight, but you have to find a way to find your own answer. And I think that's the biggest question mark in this game is when times get tough for Iowa State and they're playing a tough team in a tough environment, how do you respond? How do you answer? Do you kind of shell up and get into ISO ball and let teams, kind of run all over you, dominate in the paints, in the boards or whatever? Or do you kind of chest up, continue to run the offense, continue to get good looks, dominate the half court, win in transition, obviously create turnovers, get rebounds? Do you go that route or do you kind of shell up? And I think this game will be a really good indicator for us, but also a massive confidence boost if they can snag this win, especially if it's close. I'd love if it wasn't. I'd love the stress-free experience, but either way, I think we're in for a real treat tonight is my guess. Let me know what you guys think down below of Jimmie Rogers of Iowa State versus Kansas. whatever you're thinking, I want to hear it. Shout out to every single one of you guys for watching until this point. If you haven't hit subscribe already, what are you doing? It's literally completely free and helps us prove that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state. Until next time, Cyclone fans, sayonara.